You're listening to OMTimes Radio. The following is an encore presentation. Welcome to Joy of Business with host Simone Milasas, a dynamic business leader with a difference. Simone has founded and operated many businesses from a young age and has always done business differently. Today, Simone is the worldwide coordinator of Access Consciousness and travels the world presenting Joy of Business programs using access tools and empowering people to know that they can create business in a different way and make money doing it. Simone Milasas, weekly on OMTimes Radio.
Hi everybody, welcome to Joy of Business with your host, Simone Milasas. And today I have Miss Marilyn Bradford, and we're talking about addiction, which has many different levels, and we're also talking about being addicted to debt, because that's one of the things that I've noticed is that people become addicted to having no money. So strange, weird, yes, but that's what people are choosing. So we'd like to change that and offer you some tools to do so. So welcome, Marilyn Bradford.
Thank you, Simone. I am delighted to be here.
I'm delighted to have you. So let's start off with a couple of questions, because, I mean, I've known you for quite some time now. And so tell me a little bit about your history of working, because you've got a business called Right Recovery for You, and you've got a website, rightrecoveryforyou.com. And what I've noticed over all the different conversations I've had with you is you have a very different definition of addiction than what most people have. You look way beyond alcohol and drugs, because that's what most people think. Oh, addiction, it's to alcohol and drugs. And when I listen to you, there's so much more to it than just alcohol and drugs. That's the obvious, as they say. So what sort of definition do you have of addiction, and what else can you tell us about that?
Well, one of the things that's a little bit different about me is that I don't focus on the target of addiction. Pretty much in this reality, people are looking at, oh, the alcohol is the problem, or the drug's the problem, or the gambling is the problem. And I had lots of diagnosed addictions at one point back in the 80s. I was diagnosed as being an alcoholic, and I was also on the verge of an eating disorder, and I was a smoker, and I had all of these, quote, addictions. And I did traditional treatment for a while. And while I was able to actually not engage in the addictive behavior, that was pretty easy for me, I was not real happy about some of the things I was told, that, you know, I had to have this as an identity, that I would have this for life, that I didn't have the power in myself to do anything about it. So at the same time, well, shortly after, we'll just go with becoming sober in the 80s, I went on to graduate school to become a psychotherapist with a specialty in addiction. And I was always asking questions like, isn't there anything else? I mean, this is great, and I'm very grateful that, you know, this was available, but I know there's more, I know there's more. That's possible. I don't really believe that we're all powerless. And so or that we have to be the effect of these things. And I was seeing it all over. You know, people were addicted to going to their treatment programs. But anyway, at one point, about 8 or 9 years ago, I started Access Consciousness. And I wasn't doing it to, you know, have anything to do with addiction, but I started using the tools I was getting and applying them to my clients, because by that point I was a full-blown therapist, had been for 15 years or so. And my clients were getting better faster. And I was like, well, that is really interesting. So I approached Gary Douglas, and I said, hey, can we do something with addiction and access? And he said, absolutely. And that's when Right Recovery for You was found. And what I began to notice was, instead of focusing on the target, I realized that all addictions had the same root cause. So it didn't really matter whether you were addicted to relationships, or you were addicted to eating 10 gallons of ice cream, or you were addicted to alcohol. It was really about choosing a behavior, a place where you could go, where people could go to disappear and not exist for a while. It was a place where people who just found their psychic abilities or whatever it was just their awareness too overwhelming, or they just were feeling too wrong. They didn't know how to fit in, and that's one thing that I found with anybody who shows up with an addiction is that they know from an early age they don't fit, but nobody tells them that that's okay. In fact, they get a lot of messages about being wrong. So addiction is really an avoidance, a kind of flight from yourself, and it doesn't matter so much what the target is as that you get to disappear for a while. And that's a pretty different approach.
So you keep mentioning target, Marilyn. What do you mean by the target? What's the target?
Well, the target is whatever you've decided you're going to be addicted to. So you can be addicted to poverty. You can be addicted to being a victim. You can be addicted to chocolate. You can be addicted to
most
abuse.
People look at a target as something greater than, like as something that they're striving for. But what you're indicating here is the target is to create some sort of addiction, like you said, whether it's to chocolate or poverty or relationship or drugs or alcohol, etc., to avoid something? Is that yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
And in a way, it is something that people strive for. I need a way to avoid this. I need a way to avoid feeling so wrong, feeling so weird, feeling so different, not being able to manage life. Nobody gave me the rule book. What can I use for that? Yeah.
So we're talking about that too, because one of the things and why I wanted to invite you on here was because it is a really different way to look at addiction. And I know that when people hear it, oh, they were an addict or, you do think of alcohol and drugs. Like that's immediately what you go to. And also the refusal to acknowledge that you're not controlled by that, which I will, ask you more questions about that a bit later. But one of the things I wanted to bring up was about the addiction to debt, because what I noticed, Marilyn, was when I first met Gary Douglas, in 13, 14 years ago, I was 187,000 Australian dollars in debt. Which is a reasonable amount, and yes. I didn't really have a great deal to show for it, yet I was in debt, and you wouldn't have noticed, like I definitely wasn't walking around, screaming out, poverty and the scarcity and poor, pitiful me. I still lived my lifestyle as I currently wanted to, which is probably why I kept getting more and more into debt. But, I'll refer this story a little bit because there's a lot of different tools that I gathered, and one of the things that I noticed, though, was after I did get out of debt, using the Access Consciousness tools, I remember sitting in my office and looking out the window, and I'm looking at my computer, and I've got, I can see the beautiful trees, etc., and I'm looking at my bills and my credit card and my bank account and all of that, and I realized that I've got money, that I'm no longer in debt. And I was like, wow. And I was like, I actually have money. I'm no longer in debt. And I sat there, I was on my own, and I'm like, wow, this is it? This is what it feels like, and I was like, oh, that's a bit of a letdown, Yeah. I don't know what I was expecting, like the marching band to come up and the fireworks to, be out in the middle of Brisbane being like, Simone's now out of debt or something like that. And it was a bit of a letdown, I tell you, to have money. That's being honest. And what I noticed in 2 weeks later was I found myself back in debt. And luckily, because I had the Access Consciousness tools, I was like, what am I creating with this? What am I doing? Yeah. So I asked myself questions, and I realized I was more comfortable being in debt than having money. So, of course, because I had the tools, I was able to change that. But it was like a new muscle. I really had to be willing to change my point of view and go, okay, what would it look like to be comfortable having money? Not be comfortable with no money. And I've really noticed that that's shown up for so many people. It's like you were saying, it's like you fit in, and it's like you become like everybody else. It's like, oh, look, my credit card's way up, your credit card's way up. Look, we must be the same. It's like commiserate with each other over our poverty.
Absolutely, so Simone. Brilliant, yes.
Well, what have you noticed about that? Like, what have you noticed? Because I noticed for myself.
Well, what I've noticed, and I've definitely had my own issues with debt too, is first of all that I'm more comfortable with it than not, but also that a lot of times what's really going on is less to do with what the addiction appears to be and more to do with the belief systems that underlie it. So, for instance, in my family, both my parents grew up in the Depression. And what I learned was that the world was a place of scarcity. There wasn't enough money, there wasn't enough affection, there was a small amount of, my mother used to weigh out the little portions of meat, and you could have your little portion of steak, but you couldn't have anybody else's. And another thing that I've realized while doing this work with addiction is that while we learn the verbal language of our parents, so it's English or it's Aussie, which is sort of English, I think, but and sometimes, you learn German or you learn whatever it is. No, I love Australian. I just don't always understand it. But but you also learn an energetic language from your family. I learned the language of poverty. I learned the language of So that was a belief system that I went into the world with. There isn't enough. That's one of the belief systems. And I also learned that I wasn't willing to save and scrunch the way my family did and wear the same old pair of terrible shoes for months and months and months. So what did I do? I spent money that I knew I didn't have because I wanted the things, knowing that it would create debt, and then I could still fit in because even though I had the things, I had the debt, which meant that I was still living out the language of poverty and scarcity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, to me it looks like you have a whole lot of conflictual paradigms going on, because if you've got, as you say, the belief systems, and I like the way you referred to it as the energetic belief systems, because, I remember growing up too, Marilyn, and at the dinner table, I grew up with, definitely, meat and 3 veg, meat done, well done, and a glass of milk, and we spoke about our day. And every time I tried to talk about money or business, because for me, the story of business, it was always something really interesting. Every time I tried to talk about that, my mother would be like, we don't discuss that at the dinner table. And then we'd start talking about the bird that was outside, or the person who lives up the road, sisters, aunties, uncles, kid won in a swimming carnival. And I always remember sitting there thinking, this is crazy. I'd really love to talk about business and money and the creation of it. But we weren't allowed to. So I get that that's an energetic belief that you don't talk about it. You don't talk about it if you have it or if you don't have it. And I remember once, I think I was about 4 or 5 or something, and my brother would have been 6 or 7. And we could overhear my mum and dad fighting about money. We're downstairs and, we're like, oh my goodness, because we're poor, and we can hear mum and dad yelling at each other about money. So what we did was we went into our bedrooms and we got all our favourite toys and we brought them upstairs and we said, Mum and Dad, we know that we're poor now, so we've got our toys here and we'll sell them, So can you imagine what that would do to 2 adults fighting and their kids coming in and bringing these toys saying, don't worry, we've got it, we're going to, we'll sell these for you. So it was very funny to see that it changes the paradigm and changes the energy of, what was occurring. So we're going to get more back to that, because this has been, it's such a weird, different topic, the addiction to debt. So we're going to go to a break and we'll come back real soon.
Host your show on IOM-FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. the cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Hi everybody, welcome back to The Joy of Business with your host Simone Milasas, and I'm joined here with Marilyn Bradford, and we're talking about addiction and primarily being addicted to debt. Now, one of the things that Marilyn was mentioning, which is, it's so interesting to me because it takes choice out of it, whereas you always have choice, and if you're willing to see the choices that you've made based on other people's points of view, like the beliefs that she was talking about, like is it addiction, or is it the underlying beliefs that you've been created through your childhood, through, I don't know, where you were born, like what country were you born in? It's like, what's the belief system about money there? Are you allowed to have it? Are you not allowed to have it? And, I was just mentioning about my parents fighting about money and us wanting to, sell the toys. And it's like, that's an energetic belief systems that's set up. And the funny thing is, what I didn't notice, or I didn't know, I was 4 or 5 years old, is that we had assets, but we were cash poor. So to a kid hearing that, it's like we had no money, we were now poor. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and what does poverty mean to you? And it's like, I remember hearing stories. I've got a couple of close friends that their parents were like, rich people aren't happy. Like, rich people are just this, this, and this. And it's like all these judgments of what rich people are. So, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she said that her mother always told her that you can either be a rich person or a good person. So, of course, her whole life she's trying to be a good person. And she's in her early 50s. Only this year has she started to realize that she can be a good person and have money. And it's like, so what if you didn't have to wait that long to discover that, money, it can just be fun. And it's like, it's okay to have it. You're not wrong for having money. So everything like that is never where that you've decided you're wrong for actually having money. And if you have way more money than anybody else in your family, which is a huge key there, where you destroy and uncreate it, right and wrong, good and bad, pock and pot, all nine shorts, boys and beyond. Again, if you want to hear about that clearing statement, I just want to mention that if you want to hear about the clearing statement, go to theclearingstatement.com. So it'll tell you all the information about it. But this stuff just works. So what's brilliant about that, Marilyn?
Yeah, well, very similar thing in my family. My father turned down the vice presidency of an oil company to become a professor at a very prestigious New England university. And what I was taught all growing up was basically that business was basically for commoners, and it wasn't something that you did. And sacrificing financially and being poor was noble. It sounds insane, but I know that I attended a number of your classes before I was really able to rid myself of that belief system. But if you're starting out, and I would suggest to anyone, I've got some tools and some other ideas, but I would suggest to anyone who's finding themselves in the addiction to debt, who's finding that they're much more comfortable being poor or constantly running up their cards, to ask a lot of questions about what belief systems, what energetic patterning around money and debt and business did they receive from their family of origins or their cultures, like you were saying. There's some cultures where women aren't supposed to have money, or if you have money, then you have to take care of your entire extended family for generations. So other people, I don't want to do that, so I'm just not going to have money. So if you can identify and destroy all of the ways you've aligned and agreed or even resisted and reacted to these belief systems, then you're much freer to actually have the choice that you were talking about earlier, Simone. But if you have these paradigms in place, you're pretty stuck.
And have a look too, like what happens in your life. I remember being in Los Angeles once, and I was driving around with a friend of mine who was looking for an apartment. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll, drive around these neighborhoods with you. And there was one neighborhood that we went to, and we drove down it, and I was sort of like, oh, no, you don't want to live here. And it sort of wasn't an area that I would live in. There was another one that we went to, and I was sort of like, oh, this could be nice. This is pretty cool. And I can't remember those two suburbs. And then the third area we went to, I feel like Goldilocks and Three Bears. The third area we went to, it was in Beverly Hills. It was one of the gated areas or something. And we drove through the gates, and I remember whispering, and I went, are we allowed to be in here? And we drove through, it was Bel Air. That's where it was, Bel Air. And it was so interesting for me because there was this sense of peace, and the silence was so loud. And as we drove around, it definitely was an area that I was like, wow, it's sort of like almost like, let's get out of here. And then later that day, because of the Access Consciousness tools, I cannot, recommend them enough. I realized that the first area we went to, I wouldn't have lived there because to me that was more, had more poverty about it. The second area where I felt comfortable again was sort of more, middle to upper class, which is how I was brought up. So I felt comfortable with how I was brought up. Yet going to Bel Air, I felt uncomfortable again. So it's like, what if you could destroy and uncreate all the decisions, the judgments, the conclusions, the computations that you've come to about what is right or wrong for you, of what feels good, of what's comfortable for you, destroy and uncreate everything that is, times a godzillion, right and wrong, good and bad, pock and pot, all nine shorts, boys and beyond, and go for a walk in some different neighborhoods and start to walk around and use this crazy Access Consciousness clearing statement because it works, and just like walk past them, hugely more expensive or more cheaper than where you would live, and pock and pot everything that doesn't allow you to receive it. Because the thing is, you have to be willing to receive everything and have no judgment. So how many judgments do you have in place that keep the judgment in place about having money or having no money? And everything that is where you destroy and uncreate it.
Right, wrong, good, bad, pock, pot, all nine shorts, boys and beyond.
There you go, the pock pocker.
Well, and a corollary to that, one thing that Gary has recommended is go into an expensive store. Dress up, look nice, because that does make a difference. And go into a jewelry store or an antique store and just tell yourself, okay, I could have anything that I would like in here. I might have to put it on layaway and get it 10 years from now, but I could actually, and see what you actually like. Begin to familiarize yourself with the energy of wealth and having, because that's another thing. That may be such an unfamiliar energetic patterning that it's really difficult for you to receive it, to feel comfortable with it. So you can do things like that to allow yourself to become really comfortable. If you ever have a chance that's easy for you, upgrade to first class. Sometimes it's easier than you think. I upgraded on a recent flight for $50 when I checked in. If first class was empty. Get used to how that feels and know that you could have anything like that. So a lot of it is getting used to an energy that's different from poverty and debt and that sort of nagging, pulling you down kind of energy.
Can you talk a little bit more, Marilyn, about the energetic patterning, and if you've got any processes, please feel free to run them?
Well, it's simply that we pick up behavioral patterns and ways of looking at the world that are passed down to us. It's not something that's really easy to explain cognitively, but if you realize, well, one thing is the Access Consciousness tool, 99.5 or 98% of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions aren't yours. And so you know that you picked up a lot of these from your family. If you have a knee-jerk reaction to anything, that's some kind of energetic patterning you picked up. It's like, oh, here's the stimulus, beautiful jewels, and this knee-jerk reaction is to pull back. Oh, I can't have that, and turn away. Because you may, for instance, I was working with someone this morning who had a patterning around not deserving. Her mother didn't believe she deserved anything. Her father didn't believe he deserved anything. How could she, and it was never said, except she verbalizes it now, but how could she come out of that energy? If you think of what is the energy of not deserving, of someone who believes they don't deserve? Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I was in Italy once with a good friend of ours. She grew up in a hippie commune. And, we were walking around sightseeing, doing all of that. And then it was time for lunchtime. We walked past this restaurant, and it smelled so good, and it looked good. And, so our upbringings are completely different, okay? I went to a private school. It's like, above middle class, and she grew up in a hippie commune. I'm not even thinking about it. And I go, let's go for lunch in here. I didn't find out till much later that she got so angry at me because it was beautiful white tablecloth, beautiful, nice big glasses, you know,
Yes.
and I was just like, oh, this is going to have great food, it's going to have great wine. And she got so angry at me expecting her to be able to go into this restaurant. Now, she actually could afford that restaurant at that time, so I didn't think about it. Like, I wasn't like, don't worry, lunch is on me or anything. But it was very funny because we're very good friends, and it came up at a later date at just how angry she was getting at me for taking her to this restaurant. So I guess that that's an energetic pattern. You don't walk into a restaurant with white tablecloths and nice, big, beautiful wine glasses. It's like you're supposed to go to, you know, the pizzeria on the corner or something.
Right,
so it's like everywhere
exactly.
that you haven't been willing to change your energetic pattern, where you destroy and uncreate it.
Yes.
Right and wrong, good and bad, pock and pot, all known, shorts, boys and beyond. And I love it. It's like, what if you could take yourself out of the comfort zone that you've decided is yours, like what you're talking about? It's like, you know, what if you were willing to be uncomfortable with your life and living? What if you're willing to commit to your life? I mean, one of the things Gary and Dana are talking about recently, which I just love, it's like you have to be willing to commit to your life. Because if you're willing to commit to your life, then you can have your own financial reality. You can have your own business. And it's like, but if you're not, then what you're actually doing is buying somebody else's financial reality. So how many of you have been buying somebody else's financial reality instead of yours? And what if their financial reality is always the struggle? And how many people love the struggle? So everywhere that you've decided that struggle is greater than actually having money, will you destroy and uncreate it? Right and wrong, good and bad, pock and pot, all known, shorts, boys and beyond. Yes.
Well, and that's a great topic, and I know we're going for a break, and when we come back, I have another tool that people can use to begin to look at that.
Awesome. So let me run just a couple of processes here too. Now, this is an interesting one before we go to break, is what do you love about being in debt? Now, when I run that, most people go, I don't love being in debt. You know what? If you're creating it, somewhere you love it. It's like either what Marilyn was mentioning before, you fit in, you feel the same as everybody else. It's like that energetic pattern, you know, the form of addiction, which is really the beliefs underneath it. So everything that is, we destroy and uncreate it, right and wrong, good and bad, pock and pot, all known, shorts, boys and beyond. Now the flip side is, what do you hate about being in debt? And everything that is, destroy and uncreate it, right and wrong, good and bad, pock and pot, all known, shorts, boys and beyond. So take these two processes and put them on a loop and run them simultaneously. What do you love about being in debt? And any answer that comes up, pock and pot it. And what do you hate about being in debt? And everything that is, pock and pot it. So we're going to go off to a break and we'll be back to you really soon. Thanks for joining us here on OMTimes with Joy of Business.
As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
The Laying On of Hands Healing Radio Show is about treating the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. Join me, Charles Smith, as I share life-balancing measures such as nutrition and spiritual practices to help you take charge of your own health and wellness every Thursday at 7 p.m. on OMTimes Radio.
Radio Namaste leads you down the yellow brick road into portals of consciousness with the blue-collar goddess as your host. Interviews with humans who could be famous or just popular, and answers to everything are on the agenda. Tune into OMTimes Radio and drop in on Thursdays at 3 Eastern. It's a different brand of enlightenment.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hi everybody, welcome back to The Joy of Business, and you're with Simone Milasas, your host, all the way from Sunshine Coast, Australia, and we've got Marilyn Bradford, and are you in New Mexico, Marilyn?
I am.
You are. I know you used to live in Texas for a while, and you made some choices, changed some stuff up, and now you're in New Mexico. So we're talking about addiction, and we're talking about primarily being addicted to debt and how we can change that and what choices we can make. So Marilyn, you said you've got a few more tools that you'd like to gift the lovely people listening here.
Yes, and one of them is essentially a variation on what you're asking, or what you were using right before the break. But it's, what contribution is debt to my life and living? Because one of the things that I've realized, I've been a psychotherapist for like 24 years, something like that, is that all behavior is purposeful. So that if you're creating debt, it's contributing something. And if you can just keep asking that question, I mean, it may be that, as we talked about earlier, it helps you fit in. It could also be something like, one of the things that came up for me with debt is if I made a lot of money and didn't have debt, I would be showing my family that they were wrong, that wasn't the only way that the world could be. And a lot of us, even if our families were not the greatest, we have a kind of a loyalty to them. We don't want to make people feel bad, and that's another thing. And I would like to mention a story that you told, Simone, at one point, which was that you were sitting in first class on a plane, and all these people, I think it was in Costa Rica, but all these people from Access who were going to the same place were coming by and seeing you, and for an instant you were like, oh gosh, shrinking, I don't want to make them feel bad. And then you talked about realizing that you could actually be an inspiration. So, and say, hey, if Simone can do that, I can do that. What the heck? Yeah. So what if you were willing to be an inspiration with your creation of wealth, rather than something that was down to the lowest common denominator, something where you were sort of hiding in the field of weeds with everybody else? And everything that doesn't allow you to be the financial inspiration for people, would you be willing to destroy and uncreate that times a godzillion?
Yes.
Right and wrong, good and bad, puck and putt, online shorts, boys and beyonds. Another thing, you can ask, debt, one of the things about debt is that there used to be debtors' prisons. So one thing I'll ask people is, what prison have you created for yourself that if you didn't create it would give you total freedom and choice? And everything that is, destroy and uncreate it times a godzillion.
Right and wrong, good and bad, pop and pot, online shorts, boys and beyonds. Can you run that once more and then talk about it a bit more, please?
Yes. What prison have you created for yourself that if you didn't create it would give you freedom and true choice?
Everything
that is. Yes, right and wrong, good and bad,
pop and pot, online shorts, boys and beyonds. So what was the debtor's prison?
Well, debtor's prison, it's now illegal, at least I think in most countries, but debtor's prison was literally that if you owed debt or accrued debt and you couldn't pay it, you were thrown in jail. You were thrown in the dungeon.
Huh. Wow. Yeah. So wow, that's interesting. So you were literally punished for having no money?
Yes. No, you were punished for not being able to pay the people and for creating it. Yeah.
Huh.
And of course, a lot of the societies were created in such a way that you didn't have any choice but to go into debt.
Wow. God, it reminds me of, you've probably heard the stories of convicts coming out to Australia from Britain. And people were being sent out here because they stole a loaf of bread to feed their family. It was like, or a pint of milk or something like that. Like for these small things because their family was starving to death. And they got sent out to Australia for that. And it's like now people can't, it's hard to immigrate here.
Right,
That's a big joke.
Everybody's realizing how cool it is.
Yeah, can I steal a loaf of bread and get sent to Australia? No.
But if you have any sense of wrongness, and that's something I haven't talked about that I'd really like to touch on, is one of the things I found in my work with addiction is that all of these addictions, like alcohol and drugs and debt, are actually secondary addictions, and there is a primary addiction to judgment and the wrongness of self. And that's one of the things that fuels both the pain of looking for a place to escape to and also the sense of not deserving, so that makes debt an easy target for addiction. Well, I don't deserve to have money. I don't deserve to show that, I can actually have a life I enjoy. So I'll just create a lot of debt because I can go disappear into that and spend money, and then I can feel
so
bad.
Marilyn,
because,
that sounds to me more like it's not about what you are addicted to, whether it's drugs, debt, or relationships or love or whatever that is. It sounds more like the addiction to the wrongness.
Absolutely. That is the primary addiction. At least that's what I've found in working with people. I've never worked with anyone who had an addiction who didn't have an enormous sense of wrongness.
Okay, so what can we
judgment.
offer people? What tools have you got for people to actually change that, and can they change it?
Okay, they can absolutely change it. And the first thing is just an idea that if you can really get this, can make a huge difference, and that is all judgment is arbitrary. There isn't a single judgment of something being right or wrong or good or bad that's not just somebody else's point of view. And judgment, that's numero uno about judgment. The second thing is judgment is always destructive. It never creates. And many people try to motivate themselves, even say being with an addiction to debt. Well, see how bad and wrong you are? You know, you've got this, you owe $30,000. Now you better get off your butt and do something. I mean, are we ever motivated by making ourselves really wrong or having someone else wrong? Make us wrong? No, never. So if you can first take a look at ending the judgment in your life, and there are lots of things that you can do with that. Try giving yourself even an hour that's judgment-free. And you'll find it's not as easy as you think if you're just starting out. Every time a judgment comes up, just say, I'm sorry, you can come back at 10 o'clock, but from 9 to 10, we're not having any judgments. Surround yourself with people, if you can, or even find one person who doesn't judge. You know how great you feel when you're in the presence of someone who doesn't actually judge? I mean,
I'm lucky enough to actually live with one. My partner's like that. He's incredible. Yeah.
It's incredible. And some people don't even have that in their life. If you don't, look to your pets. I mean, animals, be in nature. Those are wonderful sources. For once again, we're talking about experiencing a different energetic environment. I think one of the reasons that nature is so attractive to people is that it doesn't have any judgment. It just is. It's being present. And that's another thing. You can't actually be in judgment and be present at the same time. So if you're willing to be present and not judge yourself, even if you get a credit card and a statement and it says, you owe $20,000 and you're 2 months late, and instead of going, I'm so terrible and bad, or see, that just proves how wrong I am, just go to, okay, if I wasn't making this so significant, if I wasn't judging, what would I be aware of? What's actually going on here? And you can learn to begin to ask questions that give you an awareness of what's actually going on rather than defaulting into judgment, which actually prevents you from choice and from seeing what's actually going on with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and as you're talking to Marilyn, I'm wondering, it's like, how often are people really willing to acknowledge their capacities? Because when you're talking about, like the being in debt, the $20,000 on the credit card, and, see, look, proves there I'm wrong, I'm bad, rather than it's like, okay, what capacities do I have here? It's like, what can I put into action with my business or my money flows to change it? Because everyone has far greater capacities than what they're willing to acknowledge. And they're so obvious to others. Like, you're like, seriously? You're great at this. I mean, my partner, she's in the bathroom that he built us. It's incredible. It's got we've got a skylight. We've got an infrared sauna in it. We've got beautiful bath. The tiling work is incredible. He's got this feature wall that's a rock. It's built with all these different rocks with holes in it for, some candles, etc. It's like anyone who comes to our house, especially tradesmen, look at the bathroom and go, wow, can I take a photo of that? And we're like, sure. But he refers to it as it's just a bathroom. And it's taken a lot of convincing from myself and Gary Douglas to go, dude, it's not just a bathroom. It's an incredible design. Like, I was talking to someone yesterday in Dubai, and she said, do you realize that if Brendan came to Dubai, how much money he could make designing bathrooms and kitchens? Like, you'd make so much money because they also don't have a problem with money. They've got the money to spend on fine designs. So it's like,
Yes.
what capacities do you have that you haven't been willing to acknowledge, that if you did acknowledge it, you could make far more money than you've ever perceived possible. And everything at that is times a Godzillion, where you destroy and uncreate it.
Yes.
Right and wrong, good and bad, pock and parona, and shorts, boys and beyond.
And one thing about that is, if you ask that question and nothing comes up, then you might put it on hold a little while and look at all of the ways you're judging yourself and making yourself wrong. Because if you're in a barrage and shower of judgments, it may be difficult for you to see those capacities. Another thing that you can do, and that's absolutely right. People have amazing capacities that they're not aware of. You can ask your friends. Okay, this may be a really weird question, but do I actually have any capacities? Pardon? Yeah.
Well, has anyone ever tasted your cookies, Marilyn? And it's like, your cookies are amazing. It's like, I love eating your cookies. You're baking. And it's like, I know you bake for the sheer joy of it. And it's like, and it's a huge capacity. And
well,
it's like,
thank you. You know what's so weird is I quit baking for about 2 years. And I'm just starting to get back to it. Well, I think some of it is I was living in a place that was not nourishing or nurturing to me, and going more into wrongness than I realized, and I just didn't feel very creative. And
so that's actually a very key element there too, Marilyn. It's like, what have you got as your surrounding areas? It's like, when you say that 1 hour a day to get out of judgment, it's also like that. What if you had 1 hour a day and 1 day a week that was about nurturing you with no judgment?
Yes.
And it's like, what if you created your surroundings? Like, are you what friends do you have? And it's like, I'm sorry. And it's like, maybe it's time to actually have a look at the friends that you have around you. Like, I remember Gary asking me a whole lot of questions when I met him 14 years ago. And every single person I had around me judged me profusely. But I was so used to it. And it's like, every relationship I ever had was about, how much can they judge me and my body? That's what made me feel comfortable, until Gary finally, woke me up, spoke to me with a very stern voice and was like, you have to change this. What if you were willing to have people who are kind and caring around you? So we'll look at that in the next break, and thank you for joining us on OMTimes. We'll be back really soon.
The truth is, you can't change the world if you're broke. I know, I tried. Isn't it time you turned your life's calling into a profitable, freedom-based business? I'm Michelle Barr. Join me every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern for Sacred Success.
Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business. Join Elliot Jolish, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jolish Hour, as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jolish Hour. Host your show on IOM-FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
Hi everybody, Simone Milasas on OMTimes with Marilyn Bradford, and you're on the Joy of Business segment. And we're talking about addiction and being addicted to debt and what creates it, what causes it, how can you change it and choose something completely different. So one of the things we were talking about is judgment, because judgment is really what locks you into creating an addiction. And it's like, if you had no judgment, what would your life be like? And one of the things that came up for me, it was a couple of years ago in New Zealand at a Access Consciousness 7-day event. And it was like pretty much what I was referring to before we went on the break, is the discarding that occurred to me throughout my life, like I was constantly, God, I can't even speak today. I was constantly discarded from my family. It's like, I mean, they were like, oh, you're the black sheep, you're the one that, and I was always looked at like that. So I was used to that energy of being discarded, and it became very normal to me. So, like I said, any of the boyfriends I had, any of the friends I surrounded myself by, there was an energy of being discarded. So then that would become the rightness of my point of view, the rightness of the wrongness of me. And how many of you are functioning from the rightness of the wrongness of you?
Yes.
Rather
yes.
than, like we were talking about, having a look at your capacities. And it's like, you know what, I was never willing to see that I had any kindness or caring in me. And it's like, I still look at it and I'm like, I notice different things and I'm like, oh, it's a really kind thing that I just did. And it's like, where have you not acknowledged the kindness that you are and the kindness that you can be to you as well? So everything at that is times of God's doing, where you destroy and uncreate it, right and wrong, good and bad, pocket puddle, names, swords, boys and beyonds. And who are you surrounding yourself by? What are your local surroundings that if you change them would change your entire reality?
Absolutely. And that you have the right to change them. You have the right to have people who don't judge you and are kind and caring, to have an environment that's supportive, to have fun, to take time for yourself. Yet many of us don't grow up knowing that. I mean, my sort of version of what you were talking about, Simone, is, I mean, in my family, I was always expected to be less than. So I surrounded myself with people, quote, friends, and our friendship was based on they were the star and I was the one who was less than. And Gary Douglas pointed this out to me, and it was shocking to me to realize that. It's like, but that's my role. I don't know if I can do a different role.
For what reason would you choose that? So is that one of those energetic beliefs that you were talking about too?
Absolutely. It was an energetic patterning that I learned in my family, and I kept replicating. Until I realized first what it was and that I didn't have to do that. I could make a different choice. But like you were talking about, it was comfortable to me. And it's really that willingness and that demand of yourself. You know what? That's another thing. The demand is part of Access Consciousness. It's an amazing tool. It's like, whatever it takes, I'm changing this. And you make that demand of yourself. And then you can start asking questions. Okay, what can I be aware of here? Is there somewhere I need to go or call, or is there a teleclass for me to listen to? Or, what contribution can I be to me changing this? And what else is possible? And what can show up? And one of the things that I ask when I feel a little bit stuck is, what have I decided is not possible that actually is possible, that if I would allow it would change everything? And everything that doesn't allow that, right, wrong, good, bad, pot, puddle, and shorts, boys and beyonds. Because we get locked in by these belief systems and energetic patterning, and we can't even imagine, what else is there. It's like growing up in rural America and trying to imagine what the moon is like, or Paris or something. You don't have any way to imagine it. So you want to begin asking for things that are beyond your imagination, beyond what you've decided is possible. And amazing things can begin to show up. I mean, truly. So it's not that you're bad or wrong or limited. When you really begin to get out of this judgment, see, here's the thing about addiction. A lot of the ways it's dealt with in this reality is you have to fight it and all of that. But when you begin to step into your capacities and the being that you truly be, you get out of the judgment. The addictions fall away of their own accord. And I can give you a very recent example for myself. I've been looking at this addiction to debt. And part of it was this whole scarcity. So I went into resistance and reaction, and I was noticing that whenever I'd go out to dinner with people or lunch, or we'd go to the store, I would always spend more money than anybody else. I'm like, that's a pattern. Okay.
Right.
So what is that? What can I do? And the 4 questions, I love these questions from Access. What is it? What can I do with it? Can it change if it lightens up? Yeah, how do I change it? So I was asking all of that, and I realized that was my resistance and reaction to scarcity. I was going to have more of everything. I was going to order 2 appetizers and 3 salads and, you know, the most expensive entree and dessert and, you know, and I was like, wow. But just that awareness, it was so funny because I was coming back from this class in Houston this past weekend or Monday and with a friend of mine. We were on the same flight and we were having dinner in Dallas before we got on our next flight. And I looked at, and we finished, and I looked, and I went, wow, you ordered more than I did. You know, and she'd had more to eat and 2 glasses of wine, and I had 1 glass of wine and tea, and I was like, okay, something's changing. And that's another thing that's really crucial, is to acknowledge when things are changing. Because once you acknowledge that, wow, you know what? I made a different choice here. That's like telling the universe you can do that, and you can make another different choice and another different choice and another different choice. You can begin learning about money. I highly, highly recommend taking any of Simone's classes. I've taken a number of them, and they're amazing. And it's changed my whole attitude towards business and money and wealth and all of that. So you can make these changes. Yeah.
And one of the things I just want to mention too is that you mentioned about choice. And I always hear so many people say, oh yeah, if I had a choice, or I don't have any choice. If you hear yourself saying that, just stop for a moment, take a breath and go, okay, I actually do have a choice. Because I mean, people talk about, you know, I mean, one of the tools that I've mentioned on the Joy of Business show is putting 10% away of everything that you earn for you. And people go, but I've got all these bills to pay. How can I do that? And it's like, you know, I need to pay the mortgage or the rent. I need to pay the phone bill. You know, it's a necessity sort of thing rather than a choice. And it's like, no, it's a choice. The only difference between you and a homeless person is choice. So you have a choice for every single moment of your life. And it's like, it is nobody else's fault. It's like you cannot blame anybody, no matter even if you were born into poverty or abused or anything. It's like you still have a choice. So if there's anywhere that you're using your history as a judgment or a defense or a limitation in what you are creating now, will you please destroy and uncreate it? Times a godzillion, right and wrong, good and bad, pock and pot, all nine shorts, boys and beyond. And then ask, okay, so you do have choice. So what choices can you make today that you've been refusing to acknowledge, that if you didn't refuse to acknowledge, would change your entire reality? And everything at that is times a godzillion. Destroy and uncreate it, right and wrong, good and bad, pock and pot, all nine shorts, boys and beyond. And I really recommend listening to these shows again and writing down the processes and even recording them, putting them on a loop and listening to them while you sleep. It's like they still work. So it's like these questions with the pock and pod, going to the point of creation and the point of destruction of where you created these, you know, thoughts, feelings, emotions, limitations, you know, in this lifetime or any other lifetime too, because you pick up things from another lifetime that, you know, maybe you were an incredibly wealthy person and all your money got stolen, or you were killed because you were so rich, and you go, well, I'm never, ever, 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 ever going to do that again. So now you're addicted to debt. And it's like, that's an energetic belief from a previous lifetime. So all of the energetic beliefs that you've created from any lifetime, including this one where you destroy and uncreate it, right and wrong, good and bad, pock and pot, all nine shorts, boys and beyond. Marilyn, we've got a few more minutes to go here, and I just wanted to, what classes have you got coming up, or telecalls, etc., and where can people find you if they would like to book a session with you, etc., on Right Recovery for You?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have a page on the Access Consciousness website, and you can also find me at www.rightrecoveryforyou.com. And I'd like to mention, you know, as Simone, who has a wonderful book, The Joy of Business, I have a book called Right Recovery for You that's available through accesspublishingcompany.com or through Amazon, both regular and Kindle. And that's a great way to look at my approach, a very different approach to addiction and recovery. I've got a teleclass coming up, I believe it starts February 14th, that's listed, and it's a short teleclass, but it's about facilitating clients with addiction, and it's for anyone who is any kind of client base. I mean, it could be a lawyer, it could definitely be a coach or a chiropractor, because addiction is so common in our society, And it's not just about, obviously, alcohol and drugs, but to, workaholism, to exercise, to having the perfect body. And it creates this space or this place where people disappear. So recovery is really about people coming back into discovering and creating the greatness of them. It has very little to do with focusing on stopping the target of the addiction. It's much more about empowering people, and once people are empowered, they don't have any reason to drink 2 bottles of wine or to, work 127 hours in 3 days. I don't think you can do that, but you get the idea. And I'm coming up. I'm going to have some more telecalls and things listed. I'm going to Europe in the summer. I'm doing classes in Ireland, and I'll have some other classes put up soon. So, and I do a lot of
all over the world.
Sessions. I'm all over the world, and I do a lot of Skype sessions and things with people.
Cool. So you can contact, it's Marilyn Bradford is what you can look up on the accessconsciousness.com site or writerecoveryforyou.com. And your book is amazing, and it's such a great gift to give to people. You could even just leave it lying around in the bathroom, so people can pick it up. So I'm really, really grateful for you coming and joining us on here, Marilyn, too, because addiction and the word recovery, I'm grateful that you explained recovery like that too, because recovery always seems like, it's like, oh, I was so wrong, and it's like I'm recovering. It's like, and the judgments that you have of your past, and it doesn't have to be like that either. It's like, I like that. Recovery is more about you being you, and it's like, if you're being you, and like I said before, you're committing to your life, it's amazing that the things that you haven't been able to change before will just instantly change. It'll be really, really easy. So thank you so much, Marilyn, for joining us here on The Joy of Business on OMTimes. You're with Simone Milasas, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Simone. It was awesome. It was wonderful.